Hello, 6th grade. This is your reading video for Thursday, December 2nd. We've read, in the lesson they have us reading half of 7, stopping halfway through 7, and we're adding, and then starting there from 8, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to read chapter 8. 7 was read yesterday. You have your books. If you want to go back and read it, you can. Your worksheets are going to be 6B and 6C, and you should have those in your packets. So tomorrow we'll be reading together as well. And so there will be no worksheets, though, tomorrow. One thing I wanted to let you know also, and so I'll try to remind you in every single video that you're watching so that you'll know what these subjects are, is about the essay and poetry competition that will be, it was supposed to be Monday, but we're going to move it to Thursday. And so it's going to be Thursday. I'm going to give you the subjects here, so just hold on one second. So the subject for the poetry for elementary is called promises. Okay? And so you have to write a poem about promises. So for the poetry, the maximum number of words, maximum number is 200 for elementary. And so you can write it ahead of time and you can memorize it, but you cannot bring it with you and rewrite it in class. It has to be written from memory, or you can just make up something fresh while you're there. The amount of time that you have, you can only enter one category. You can only do a poem or a short story. It is looking for the time frame here. At the top of the page, we'll get to that later on, what you have to do. Just know that there's a limit of how much time you have. I think it's 2 hours. No cover pages. I don't see a time limit. I know there had been time limits before, and I always thought it was 2 hours. Still not seeing it here exactly. Yeah, so the limit is 2 hours, and you're allowed to use a King James Bible and a dictionary, and so you can have both of those references there and be able to write that during that 2-hour period. We will be doing it Thursday, and so probably right I would say the beginning of the day, but that sort of makes it difficult. So probably right after the second recess or the first recess in the morning. And then if anybody needs a little bit more time, we can adjust. Actually, we'll probably do it right after the lunch recess and just do it then. So that's your subject for poetry, was the, again, it was promises. Then for short story, and I'll have these written on the board when you come in as well, is to write a story about someone who tries something difficult or hard. And so you're writing a story about somebody who tries something difficult or hard. And that short story is a maximum of 750 words. And you have to count them as you do your competition piece. And you'll write down how many words that you have so that you know that you have the right amount. But maximum 750 words short story of write a story about someone who tries something difficult or hard. All right? So that'll be that. Now we're going to get ahead to read in chapter 8, Ricky and Coon. As she took the diaries down a few at a time, Connie discovered that each one was neatly labeled with a beginning and ending date. The first volume was green, the second yellow, the third green, and so on, with green and yellow covers alternating through the whole set of a dozen or more. She opened one at random. It was filled with notes that were just what Aunt Laura had described. 3:30, saw 2 sh-t sparrows and 1 h. Merganser in marsh. Barred owl, goshawk, I don't know what that is. Many finches, crows, blue jay in woods. At Gull Pond, an Iceland gull, not sure, rainy all day. The small, precise handwriting went on, page after page, interrupted only by a new date or comment on the weather. Perhaps a more recent diary would say something else. She picked up the next to last volume, a yellow one, and browsed through it. Tucked between the bird notations for September was a sentence with a name in it that caught her eye. Had a talk with Jason Ross about GC. Museum wants it. Don't know what to do. That GC had to refer to the Golden Cowrie. And the only one left was yellow. The dates in the yellow volume were wrong too, for it began with January 12th of the next year. It didn't have as many entries as the others. Besides the bird sightings, which include an excited notation about seeing the rare cinnamon teal, there was a curt record of the damage done to the house by the fallen trees. Several weeks later came a sentence that announced Philip Hendrick's decision to sell his sailboat to pay the repair bills. It was dated March 10th and must have been written just before he died, for it was the last entry. Connie riffled through the blank pages that remained and then put the diary back, feeling sorry for Aunt Laura all over again. She stared at the row of diaries. Where was the green volume that came before this one? Maybe it had been mislaid somehow on one of the other shelves. She was still looking for it when she heard her mother's call to lunch. Reluctantly, she left the study, hoping that Aunt Laura could tell her where to find the missing diary. While they ate, Connie studied the sky through the kitchen window, glad to see that pale sunshine was leaking through the clouds. Stella must have noticed it too, for she stopped by the kitchen to say, "Looks like it's clearing up, doesn't it? I spent all morning in town and I was hoping I could go down to the marsh this afternoon without getting soaked." Her dark eyes met Connie's eager gaze. "Want to come along?" "Sure," Connie exclaimed. Later, as they stood together on the bluff, Stella pointed to the birds that flew to and fro over the water. "I think there's something wrong with the geese these days. The motorcycles last night didn't help, but even before that, the birds seemed nervous about something. They usually don't spook very easily in a refuge." "Can they tell when they're in a safe place?" asked Connie. "I think so," Stella answered. "I've studied the way migrating geese behave at bird refuges compared to other places, and they just seem to know." They started down through the slippery, wet grass toward the marsh, and Connie saw the low island of white that she had noticed before. "What's that?" she asked Stella. "It looks like ice or something." Stella chuckled. "Come on closer and you'll see for yourself. Maybe we won't go to the photo blind just now. The wind isn't as cold as usual today, and we'll take a walk along the dike." On their way to the road, they ran along the top of the dikes. They passed a broad hill. A flock of Canada geese were feeding there, gabbling to each other in deep voices as they nipped the winter-brown grass. "Oh, look!" exclaimed Connie. "Here come some more." She watched as 5 Canada geese circled overhead and honked inquiringly. When the geese on the ground honked back, the newcomers set their wings and glided down, landing nearby. Connie quickly took a picture. "That flock lives here," Stella explained as they walked along the dike, "but there are lots of other Canada geese that visit the refuge." Connie stopped to pick up a long brown tail feather, and she noticed the plumes of marsh grass rustling in the wind. "These are so pretty." She touched one of the fluffy heads. "There's an arrangement of them in my room. I've been wondering who put it there." "Well, I thought it would be a right friendly thing to do," Stella said with a smile. "I was hoping Mrs. Atkins hadn't thrown it out while I was at the conference." "Thanks, I sure like it." Connie smiled up at her, glad that Stella had wanted her to feel welcome. Then she remembered the white island she had come to investigate and glanced ahead. She could see now that it was a huge flock of white birds floating in one of the larger ponds. "So that's what it is. There must be hundreds of them," she exclaimed. "Are they some kind of duck?" "Snow geese," said Stella. "They come here every fall just about this time. They're on their way south." The snow geese were busily feeding and preening and calling to each other with hoarse, excited honks. "We won't go any nearer today," cautioned Stella. "No point in making them more nervous than they already are. You'd need a telephoto lens to get any kind of picture. See how far out they are from the shore? Usually they're in much closer." The nervous geese reminded Connie of the black duck feathers they had found. "You know the tracks we saw the other day?" she asked. "I think I saw the dog that made them. It was awfully big." She couldn't forget about the dog and the boy, Ricky, and now it was a relief to tell someone about it. They walked back along the dike while she talked, and when Connie finished, Stella nodded. "I think the ranger at the refuge will have to do something about that dog. It must have come down from the Pine Barrens. Dogs like that. They're called feral dogs, often have rabies and can infect other animals. Then, of course, they bother the deer and kill a lot of birds. No wonder the geese are nervous these days. When they reached the woods above the marsh, Connie caught sight of a ragged figure ahead of them. "Hi, Ricky," she called out. "Wait for me." She hurried to catch up with the boy, expecting some kind of friendly response, but he stood there solemnly, eyeing her as though he had never seen her before in her life. Over his shoulder peered the small black masked face of a young raccoon. "Hi, Ricky," she repeated, breathless from running up the hill. She reached out to pet the raccoon, but the boy took a step backward, raising a protective hand. She pretended not to notice his rebuff. "Oh, your raccoon is so cute. I saw some little baby tracks by your footprints the other day. I guess they were his tracks. What's his name?" "I just call him Coon," the boy muttered. "Where'd you get him? I didn't see him yesterday." The boy darted a suspicious glance at Stella, who had joined them. "His mother got shot," he said briefly. "And yesterday, when he saw the dog, he took off into the woods." "We were just talking about that dog," Connie exclaimed. "Have you seen any more of him?" "Nope." "Look, here's a feather I found for my school project. Do you know what kind it is?" Connie asked. She was beginning to feel silly, the way she was rattling on, but she wanted to keep him talking. "Probably Canada goose." The boy turned his back on them and plunged into the trees, the raccoon holding on to his hair with both hands. Connie stared after him for a minute and then looked at Stella apologetically. "I guess he's just shy. I wonder who he is." Stella turned onto the trail leading, to Aunt Laura's. "He might belong to one of the families that live down the marsh a ways. Most of them are fishermen or clammers." "He said his mother is gone," Connie told her. Stella nodded. "No wonder he looks so unkempt. He probably does as he pleases. He might be an interesting person to make friends with, though. I imagine he knows this marsh as well as you know your own backyard." That evening, right after supper, Dan disappeared outside with his telescope, and Connie went upstairs to work on her journal for school. She spent a long time on a page about the marsh, trying to describe what she had seen and how it made her feel. Well, finally, she put down her pen, yawning, and her mind wandered to the roll of film that Stella had taken in to be developed. Even though it wouldn't be ready for a couple of days, she couldn't wait to see how her pictures had turned out. They wouldn't be as good as Stella's, but maybe Stella would give her some tips on how to make or take really professional ones. Of course, Stella had that expensive camera and a telephoto lens. Connie eyed her little Instamatic camera regretfully. It sure would be nice to have a telephoto lens, too. She stood up and stretched, deciding to go down to the kitchen to see if there were any brownies left from supper. Again, sorry. On her way to the stairs, she passed the open door of Dan's room and noticed that he had left his camera on the desk. He must be planning to take some pictures, too. She stared at his camera curiously, wondering if it had a telephoto lens. Maybe she could talk him into letting her borrow it. She stepped into his room to take a quick look. Just as she picked up the camera, she heard Dan's feet pounding up the stairs and she felt a guilty impulse to drop it and run. But already he stood in the doorway with his telescope. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I just wanted to see if your camera has a telephoto lens on it," she said, turning it over carefully. "Yes, it does. You'd better put it down." His face was reddened from the cold wind outside. Connie could tell by his grim expression that he hadn't found the stars or whatever it was he kept looking for. Hurriedly, she told him, "Stella's camera has a telephoto lens so she can take close-ups of the birds. And I was wondering if I could borrow yours because I want to take some pictures especially for—" "Forget it," he interrupted, turning away to set down his telescope in a corner. "Why not?" He shot her an exasperated glance. "Because you'll break it, that's why. Or it'll fall into a pond or something." "But she began in protest. He held up a hand. "Yeah, I know. It's never your fault, but it always happens. And I need to get some homework done now, okay?" Connie retreated from his room and stalked down the stairs. Someday Dan would wish he'd let her borrow his camera. She sure hoped so, anyway. And meanwhile, she was going to win that photo contest no matter what. She carried 2 brownies and a glass of milk up to her room, set them on the bedside table, and took the secret route into the study to find a good book. While she was there, she hunted through several more drawers of shelves, but soon gave up in discouragement. Back in her room, she settled down with a mystery story and her brownies and read until she could hardly keep her eyes open. Reluctantly, she began to get ready for bed. After she had said good night to Mother and was snug under the blankets at last, she remembered to pray for Aunt Laura's house. In the middle of that, she began to wonder about the missing diary. She hadn't had a chance to ask Aunt Laura about it because her aunt had been away at the doctor's all afternoon and then had been too tired to talk to anyone. Connie was still thinking about all the things that could happen to a small green book, she fell asleep. All right, so there you go. And again, worksheets 6B and 6C. And we'll see you for tomorrow's read. All right, have a good day. Bye.